My name is Hannah Mitchell, and before this experience, I would have never imagined myself sitting here, sharing something like this. I lived an ordinary life. I was a wife, a mother to 3 children, and a history teacher in Nashville, Tennessee. My days were filled with lesson plans, school meetings, driving my kids to soccer practice, and rushing through life like everyone else. I believed in God, or at least I thought I did. I went to church on Sundays, prayed when life got hard, and tried to be a good person. But if I am completely honest, I never really sought after Him. I was too busy, too caught up in the everyday stresses of life, always telling myself that I'd make time for faith later. I didn't realize how much I was taking time itself for granted until the day I died. It was October 22nd, 2017, and like any other day, I was running late. My son had a soccer game that afternoon, and I was rushing out the door, trying to gather everything at once. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and barely managed to sip my coffee before calling for the kids to hurry up. It had been raining that morning, and I remember thinking I needed to drive carefully, but as always I was distracted. Between checking the GPS, answering my husband's last-minute text, and making sure the kids were settled in the back seat, I barely had time to breathe. We were halfway there when my phone buzzed. Without thinking, I glanced down at the screen just for a second. It was a mistake, a split-second decision that I will regret for the rest of my life. When I looked back up, I saw the headlights of an 18-wheeler truck coming straight toward us. My heart stopped. The tires screeched as I swerved, but it was too late. The sound of metal crumpling against metal, the sheer force of impact, and the scream that left my lips all collided in a single, deafening moment. And then nothing. I don't remember feeling pain. There was no slow fade into unconsciousness. It was as if my existence had been ripped away in an instant. One moment, I was behind the wheel, bracing for impact, and the next, I was somewhere else. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car. I wasn't on the road. I wasn't even on Earth. I was standing in a place that words fail to describe. It was light, but not just light, it was alive. The air itself radiated warmth and peace, a kind of peace I had never known before. I felt weightless, as if I had been freed from every burden I had ever carried. The worries, the stress, the rush of life, all of it had melted away. I looked down at myself, expecting to see the broken body I had left behind, but instead I was whole. I was more than whole. My body, or what felt like my body, was glowing, wrapped in a robe so pure, so white, it seemed to be woven from light itself. I didn't understand what was happening, but there was no fear, only an overwhelming sense of belonging. Then, I felt it, a presence behind me, a presence so powerful that I knew, without turning around, exactly who it was. I turned, and there He was, Jesus. There is no doubt in my mind, no question in my heart. It was Him. He stood before me, clothed in a radiance that was beyond human comprehension. His eyes, oh, His eyes, they were unlike anything I had ever seen. They were filled with love, not the kind of love we talk about on earth, but perfect love, the kind that sees every flaw, every mistake, and embraces you anyway. The moment I looked into His eyes, I fell to my knees. I couldn't contain my emotions. I wept, not out of fear, but out of overwhelming recognition. It was as if, for the first time in my existence, I knew who I truly was. I had been searching my whole life for this moment, without even realizing it. My lips trembled as I whispered, "Am I dead?" Jesus smiled, a smile that radiated warmth. "You are here because it is not yet your time," he said gently. "But before you return, there is something I must show you." He reached out his hand, and the moment I touched it, everything changed. Suddenly, we were moving, not walking, not flying, but moving through time itself. I watched as history unfolded before my eyes, as if I had stepped outside of time and into the very fabric of creation. The world around us shifted, and suddenly, we were standing in what I instinctively knew was the beginning. Before me, a massive, glowing scroll appeared, stretching across the heavens. It unraveled on its own, revealing words that were written in a language I didn't recognize, yet somehow I understood every word. Jesus pointed to 3 names: Shem, Ham, Japheth. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I was watching Genesis 10 come to life, the table of nations, the moment humanity was divided into the great branches of civilization. These were the sons of Noah, the ancestors of every nation on earth. I watched as their descendants spread across the world, forming the foundations of the civilizations we know today. Japheth's people expanded into what would become Europe, forming the great empires and cultures that shaped the Western world. I saw them build, discover, conquer, and create. But as time passed, something changed. Their blessings, the knowledge, the land, the innovations, they began to misuse them. Instead of uniting humanity, they divided it. Instead of leading with wisdom, they took with force. I watched, horrified, as history unfolded in a way I had never truly understood before. Jesus showed me the Tower of Babel, the moment humanity tried to defy God, to build a monument to their own pride. The people were one, speaking a single language, working together as if they had limitless potential. But their hearts were not aligned with God. They sought to exalt themselves rather than worship Him. I watched as the world suddenly erupted into chaos. The once united people could no longer understand one another. Confusion spread like wildfire, and nations were born from division. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with sorrow. "This was both a punishment and an act of mercy," he said. "If they had continued, they would have destroyed themselves." At that moment, everything clicked. This was the root of humanity's divisions: race, culture, language. It all started here. The world I had always known, the divisions I had seen between people, they weren't supposed to be this way. God never intended for us to be separated by hate, by power, by greed. These divisions were the result of human disobedience, of people turning away from Him. I felt my soul tremble as I realized how much of history I had misunderstood. I had taught my students about wars, about empires rising and falling, but I had never seen the spiritual truth beneath it all. Humanity had been given so much, yet we had used it to destroy each other. As I stood there, still overwhelmed by the truth I had just witnessed, Jesus turned to me with an expression so filled with sorrow, yet so deeply loving, that I felt my soul tremble. He had shown me the origins of humanity, how we were once one people, yet through pride, greed, and rebellion, we became divided. And now, I knew there was more he needed to reveal. Suddenly, the landscape around us shifted, and I was no longer standing near the Tower of Babel. Instead, I was watching the world as it is today, our world, filled with cities, nations, and billions of people living their lives. But what I saw next made my heart ache. I saw wars, endless wars, fought over land, resources, power, and even beliefs. I saw hatred, not just between nations, but between neighbors, between brothers and sisters, between people who should have been united. I saw racism, oppression, and injustice, people being persecuted because of the color of their skin, because of their heritage, because of things that had been twisted by the hands of man. I saw people claiming to follow Jesus, yet using his name to justify cruelty, to uphold their own power, to keep others beneath them. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "Lord, why? Why did we do this?" Jesus' voice was both sorrowful and firm. Because humanity has forgotten who they are. They have forgotten me. They have allowed division to become their truth instead of love. They have built kingdoms for themselves rather than for my Father. I could barely breathe. The weight of what I was witnessing crushed me. I wanted to turn away, to close my eyes and pretend it wasn't real. But I couldn't. I had to see. I had to understand. And then he showed me something even more painful. I saw the sins of Japheth's descendants, the people who had been given so much. Their lands were vast, their minds brilliant, their hands skilled. Yet instead of using these blessings for good, many of them used them to dominate, to enslave, to control. I saw chains wrapped around the necks of men, women, and children, stolen from their homes and sold like cattle. I saw nations being stripped of their resources, their people treated as if they were less than human. I saw history unfolding in a way that I had never understood before, not just as events in a textbook, but as wounds that never truly healed. I watched as the Bible itself was twisted to justify these sins, to keep people in bondage, to convince generations that God had ordained their suffering. I felt a scream build in my throat, but it never came out. My knees buckled beneath me as I wept. I turned to Jesus, my voice barely above a whisper. Did they not know? Did they not understand what they were doing? His expression was grave. Some knew and they repented. Others were blinded by their own power and they refused to see. But my mercy is greater than their sins. Those who seek me, those who truly repent, can still be redeemed. His words shook me. Even after everything I had seen, after all the horror, he was still offering mercy. It was then that I realized just how powerful his love truly was. Jesus then turned my gaze to the present. I saw the world today, and I saw it through his eyes. I saw people turning away from God, choosing themselves over him. I saw entire nations that had once honored his name now rejecting him, pushing him out of their schools, their governments, their homes. I saw people so consumed by their own desires, by money, fame, status, that they had no room left for faith. I saw churches that had lost their way, where pastors were more concerned about popularity than preaching the truth. I saw people who called themselves Christians, yet lived lives no different than the world, compromising at every turn. I saw division even within the body of Christ, believers arguing over doctrine, race, politics, anything that could separate them. And worst of all, I saw the enemy laughing. He didn't have to destroy us. We were doing it ourselves. My heart broke all over again. Lord, what do we do? I asked, my voice shaking. Jesus' eyes, though filled with sadness, burned with something greater, hope. You carry this message. You speak the truth, even when it is uncomfortable. You remind my people that they are one body, that I do not see them as divided, but as my children. I felt something stir deep within me. A fire, a calling. Jesus lifted his hand, and suddenly I saw something beautiful, a vision of what the world was meant to be. I saw people of every race, every nation, every language standing together, hands lifted in worship. There was no hatred, no fear, no division, only love. It was a kingdom not built by men, but by God himself. I saw people embracing, healing, forgiving. I saw what humanity was always supposed to be. This is my kingdom, Jesus said. There are no divisions here. This is what I desire for earth as well. The sheer beauty of it overwhelmed me. I fell to my knees again, overwhelmed by the love, the peace, the unity. I had never felt anything like it before. I wanted to stay in that moment forever, but I knew I couldn't. I had to go back. The vision began to fade, and I felt a pull, a force drawing me away. I gasped, reaching out, not wanting to leave. Please, let me stay. I begged. Jesus smiled, gently shaking his head. You have work to do, Hannah. I felt a warmth surround me as his final words echoed in my soul. Share what I have revealed to you. Be a light in the darkness. Tell them I am coming soon. And then I woke up. I gasped for air, my body jerking violently as I opened my eyes in a hospital bed. The room was spinning, nurses shouting, machines beeping. My husband was beside me, tears in his eyes, clutching my hand as if he had been afraid to lose me. I had been gone for several minutes. The doctors couldn't explain how I had survived the crash. They said I should have died. They said I shouldn't be here. But I knew why I was still alive. I had been given a mission. From that moment on, I couldn't stay silent. I had seen the truth. I had seen what was coming. And I knew that the time for lukewarm faith, for division, for excuses was over. If you are watching this, this is not an accident. You were meant to hear this message. You were meant to understand that time is running out. Jesus is calling his people back to him, calling them to put aside division and stand together as one. The world is growing darker. The enemy is working harder. And if we don't wake up, if we don't turn back to him, we will be caught unprepared. But there is still hope. There is still mercy. Jesus is waiting, arms open wide, calling for his children to return. The only question is, will you listen? I don't know how much time we have left, but I know this. We are running out of second chances. Choose him. Today. Right now. Because one day soon, there won't be any more time left. This was my experience. This was the message I was given. And now, I have given it to you. What you do with it is up to you. God bless you.